Good evening, everyone. So I am here tonight with Deputy Mayor Florio, Committeeman Figueredo, and Committeeman Bowser. Also with us is Senator Joe Cryan and members of the 250th Planning Committee, Historical Society, and Vauxhall Historical Society. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight as we discuss our Mayor Biertuempfel, a legend in his own time and ours. We are truly grateful for your presence as we continue to celebrate our nation's 250th anniversary. Your participation makes these programs even more meaningful as we honor our shared history. I would also like to thank our Union Public Library. Thank you so much for sponsoring all of these events, and our beautiful Union Arts Center for hosting us this evening. And now I would like to welcome our two local historians, Tom Beisler and Tom Haggerty, as they talk about the life and career of F. Edward Biertuempfel. We hope you enjoy this evening's program.
Okay. Is it on? It is on. Since I recognize almost all of you, you know that I'm Tom Beisler, and then this is Tom Haggerty. We are here this evening basically because for many years, would get a phone call from Anthony Russo, former Mayor Russo, at my home, reminding me not to let the name of Biertuempfel die. And he doesn't do it much anymore. He's in Pennsylvania living with his family. So when it came time to select one of our presentations that the Historical Society had done a number of years ago, we decided that this would be an appropriate one for the 250th anniversary, since it's pretty much an important part of our town's history. Mayor Biertuempfel was born in Newark in 1894, and let's see here. And he was actually named Frederick Edward Biertuempfel, but he had a brother named Fred. His parents apparently, like German and there's his father, his mother. Both of them were born in Germany, as were his oldest two siblings, I believe. And there is the first Frederick, and then Edward. This is a census from 1900. He had 6 brothers. And a sister. There is Fred Edward. There's Frederick Fred Alvin. And then the oldest brother, Hugo. Those 3 gentlemen all lived in Union for most of their adult lives. And this is the home he grew up on, Cortlandt Street, Down Neck, Newark. House is still there. There he is visiting it, probably sometime in the 1960s. This is the school he attended, which I think was called at the time the #1 school, Newark grade school #1. He went about to the 7th grade, which was fairly typical of people born in the 1890s and the late 19th, early 20th century. To go to 7th and 8th grade and then go get a job. My grandfather was born in Newark in the 1890s, and that's what he did. He and his brothers and sisters all basically got to about the 8th grade and went to work. Now, he worked in his father and uncle's cork factory, and this is, I believe, his father. This is the Newark Cork Works. Very successful enterprise. It was basically started by the mayor's uncle, who invented a process to manufacture cork products. And before the advent of plastics, cork was used for all kinds of products. This was the factory in Newark, not far from where the family lived. And I believe this was probably the uncle's house. In those days, if you had a factory or a business, you tried to live close to it. This is the machine his uncle Albert had created. One of them, he created several, to split cork. The way you made money in those days was to find a process, a machine that would do something better than somebody else's machine or that people could do. And they were successful at it. The cork works burned in 1914. They rebuilt it. And it was eventually run. Uncle Albert, Biertuempfel's father died when he was about 14 or so. His uncle Albert ran the cork factory until the late 1930s and 1940s, when I believe the family sold it. But this is Biertuempfel and his brothers. If you want to guess which one is Mayor Ed, you can look and take a guess. I'll tell you in a minute. It's not him, 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 it is him. Wow. That is the mayor, probably somewhere, these guys are late teens, early 20s in this picture. Look pretty Teutonic, stern, not a lot of humor in their countenances, fairly German. This is the town he came to, and he married in 1922 to a Christine, and moved to Union in 1925. This was Union in 1925. Let me go back a second. There's a little quick on that. That is Morris Avenue, Caldwell Avenue, that's where the parsonage is. This is Elmwood Avenue, Stuyvesant Avenue. We just have the center cut off there. This is Bonnell Court, where all the apartments are, with the baseball field in those days. This is Pennsylvania Avenue. So this was one of the first Pennsylvania Park and Union Avenues, and Johnson Place were starting to develop as home sites at this time. But for the most part, as you can see, the town he came to in 1925 was essentially a rural environment. This is where he built his house at the corner of Overlook and Vauxhall Road. This is the site of St. Michael's Church. This is the Kelly farm. Kelly's donated the property to the church in the honor of their son, Michael, who was killed in World War I. This is the site of where he built his house on Overlook. At the time he came here, again, it was a rural community. He mentioned later on in later years, he could look down Vauxhall Road in one direction and it was basically commercial pansy farms going toward Vauxhall Road. And going down the other direction down the hill were basically fields, and they were full of daisies. And he remembered that. And later on, when it came time, he came up with the idea to have a town flower. And he chose the daisy. And wore it on a lapel button for many, many years. This is his home at Oakland, Overlook and Vauxhall Road. Built it, I think, about 1927. Got into politics because they wanted, in those days, Union used a process known as a special assessment to pay for road improvements, sidewalk improvements, curb improvements, storm sewers, things like that, in which the town would pay to put these improvements in and then assess each lot owner and property owner on the street. It's something that they don't do anymore and haven't done in years, mainly because he didn't like the idea that he had to pay for the rest of Overlook Terrace when it was only his house and the house, excuse me, his house and the house next door that was on the street. It was a technique used to encourage development. The person would buy a farm, real estate developers, file a subdivision map with the street and lots on it, and then the town would put the improvements in, and if the real estate developers could sell those lots fast enough, the people who bought them ended up having to pay for the improvements in front of them. It was very profitable for the real estate industry, but they were looking to develop the town at the time. This again is him in front of his home with the flag and his dog. These pictures were taken in 1948. This was one of the larger homes in town at the time. There he is doing something that was quite unusual in 1948. They're watching television. At home, and that's his son, F. Edward Jr., and I believe that's a daughter, Beverly, and I'm not sure who the person in the back is, probably F. Edward's girlfriend. He would have, okay. So he got involved in politics again in the late 1920s, mainly because of his opposition to having to pay for improvements that he didn't feel he should have to pay for. And to do so, he created the F. Edward Biertuempfel Association. And, and basically challenged the existing Republican Party. The town at the time was basically controlled by the Democrats in the 1920s. And he ran for Township Committee in 1929, in the primary of 1929. And he won the primary against a man by the name of Henry Reinhold, who was a plumber, kind of slash builder, who eventually became the primary real estate developer in town over the years. Ended up living in Short Hills as a millionaire. This is a dinner in his honor, and I believe this is at the high school in September of 1929. He won the election, and the Republicans took control of the Township Committee. In the meantime, the stock market crashed and the Depression started. Here he is with his running mate, Charles Bergbauer, who didn't serve very long. The mayor ended up serving for 44 years. Now, in between this and event, he was involved in trying to salvage the community from the financial decisions made in the 1920s that put the township in a significant debt situation, negative debt situation. And the Depression made it even worse. And because of that, he developed a lifelong streak of financial conservatism. They had some difficult times during the 1930s. But politically, he started to maneuver himself against the regular Republicans, or the Republican Party. He created, after he was elected, he created an organization, a club called the Regular Republican Club, as an opposition to other Republicans. And through the 1930s, he eventually got his followers onto the Township Committee. And he claimed later on in the 1960s that he let Charles Schramm be the mayor because Charles Schramm looked more like a mayor than he did. Whether that was true or not, but that was his remembrance, 35 years after he was in office. Schramm had to go to move to Pittsburgh, where he was an executive for U.S. Steel or Carnegie Steel or whatever. I'm trying to remember here, but because the steel companies all are overlapping. But he moved to Pittsburgh and left the township, and Biertuempfel was appointed or elected by the other members of the township committee as mayor in, I believe, April of 1939. Here he is back in the 1920s, late 20s, with himself. He looks a little more like the picture that we saw of him when he was younger. And there's his wife, Christine. That is William Freiberger, who probably, if he hadn't died, would have probably had the longest service in a public office in Union. He became the township clerk in 1913 when Hillside separated from Union, and the township clerk at the time lived in Hillside, so he became the Hillside township clerk, and Bill Freiberger became the Union township clerk, and he held office until he died in 1957. And the rest of these folks there's the cooking staff, happy campers here, and again, this is an idea of what people in the 1920s looked like and how they dressed, and there's a look of skepticism on Bill Freiberger's face there. And Mrs. Biertuempfel has a look that she will retain for most of her life. And here he is with this is about late 1930s, just before Mr. Schramm left for Pennsylvania. And by that time, Nelson Keeb, William Nothagel, Ben Romano, who was an old-time Republican, but more or less became part of Biertuempfel's circle. And of course, there's Mayor Ed right there. And they're in front of the police station here, which was on Caldwell Avenue in a farmhouse. It had moved from a house on the corner of Morris Avenue and Stuyvesant a few years earlier. It's the site of the current police department. Here he is. This is, I believe, 1940, his first election by a township committee for his own term. And again, you have his son, F. Edward Jr., his wife, himself, and that's his daughter, Beverly. And the gentlemen here have no idea. A lot of the folks in the pictures are unidentifiable. Anybody who might have known who they are probably long gone. And here he is with his township committee. And again, this is around 1941 or thereabouts. These are the department heads and officials who worked for the town at the time. There's Bill Freiberger. And that's Nothagel. Ben Romano, don't remember his name. I think he came and went pretty quickly. And that's another person whose face is, some of these folks would get elected and then they would move on for one reason or another. And here's November 1939. Again, this is in the high school, which is now Burnett Junior Middle School. And there is the row, there's the mayor there. Again, looking relatively young. That's Mrs. Nothagel and William Nothagel, who was a plumber. And then there's a crew of his loyal supporters. But it's a pretty good crowd. The high school auditorium held quite a few people, and even some up in the balcony. We believe that's actually Lou Giaccona. If we could make this bigger, it looks like Lou. Lou got involved in this sort of thing relatively early in life. And he would have been 16 or 17 years old when this picture was taken. But this kind of shows the size of his support. Here he is with, this is during World War II. Here he is with a group of gentlemen who constituted the Union chapter of the American War Dads. Biertuempfel was one of the founding members of that organization. It was designed to support soldiers overseas, and support, I guess they sent them packages and you know, gifts and what have you. And he was the national chairman of this group. And again, a lot of folks, if you go through the pictures, you'll see a lot of these people showing up again. But again, that's Robert Lackey, who was on the township committee with him. And there's the mayor. Growing grayer, thinner of hair, and gaining weight, which was a problem he had all his life. The organization basically lasted a few years past World War II and then declined. Okay. This is after World War II, he decided to hold a celebration. And I don't know any other town that's ever celebrated the 140th anniversary. You do the 100, you do the 50th, you do the 150th. But he decided on the 140th as an excuse to do something that we do a lot of nowadays in Union, which is to hold public celebrations. These 140 candles or 100 fountains of birthday cake. Lighting the candles. There's the mayor in his chef's hat. He likes those hats. You'll see him in a few other pictures with the chef's hat. You want to get the candles out quickly so he could get a piece of cake, I think. Yeah, there he is, taking the candles out to prepare himself for a slice. There he goes. God only knows. There were probably about 20 bakers in Union at the time, along with about 30 little supermarkets, 20 butchers, 20 milkmen. You got your food kind of piece by piece in those days. Now, here he is with the last Republican elected to the U.S. Senate from New Jersey, a man by the name of Clifford Case, gentleman right there. He was from Rahway. At this time, he's a congressman. He was eventually elected to the Senate in the, I believe, early 1950s and served for about 20 years, and till 1976, I believe. And then he was beaten in a primary, and the man who beat him in the primary lost to Bill Bradley, the basketball player, who was our senator for another 20 years or so. This gentleman here is interesting. You'll see him showing up quite a bit. He's Harold Arnold, who was kind of the mayor's best friend, and kind of a sinister-looking guy when he wasn't smiling. And you'll see that later. But the mayor seems to be happy with Senator Case. And this is a picture during World War II. The Girl Scouts are collecting nylon stockings, I assume for parachutes or something, to collect for the war. They collected all kinds of things during World War II, rubber, metal, rubber tires, and things like that. This is again, I think 1944. Dewey is running for his first time. Tom Dewey is running for president, and the mayor is there. Excuse me. The mayor is there offering support with a bucket of who knows what. And some folks hanging around. And he was very, very tough politician when it came to operating his political organization. And when he had to, ran very tough political campaigns. There came a time later on when he didn't have to run too many tough campaigns. He was reelected pretty easily eventually. But Dewey didn't win. Dewey lost in 1944 and he lost in 1948. The mayor finally came up with a winner in 1952. This is Eisenhower for president. There's a picture of Ike in back of the mayor. That is Malcolm Forbes of Forbes magazine. There's Harold Arnold smiling again. And the other folks, I guess we can't see, can't get it all in. But Robert Lackey and Ostertag, who served with the mayor on the township committee for, 20 years or so, are running again. We moved to 1958, and this was the beginning of the rumors that lasted for probably about 10 years or so, that he was going to retire. And here he is forcefully putting that rumor to rest. Here he is with Lou Bassano, who later became a state senator, and a protege. He developed several young Republicans who went on to some success. Lou was one of them. Here he is with Governor Alfred Driscoll. If you notice the look on his face, he doesn't seem to be too happy, but glad-handers were people he didn't really care for. And there's Senator Case, or Congressman Case at the time. Driscoll was the governor from 1954, I believe, till 1953. And that large, wide bridge that you cross on the way to the shore was named for him. And he also was the impetus behind the Garden State Parkway and the New Jersey Turnpike. Here he is again, and he's not looking very happy, but Mayor Ed is. So what the meaning of this picture is somewhat a mystery. Here he is with Coleman Kiss, who again served with him on the township committee for many, many years, and Governor William Cahill. He was the governor between Richard Hughes and Brendan Byrne back in the 1960s and 1970s. And again, he's smiling. This may be Governor Cahill's re-election campaign, which he lost to Brendan Byrne. Surprisingly, it was. Now here he is with Governor Minor. Again, he's got kind of a sour look on his face. Minor was a Democratic governor and kind of a glad-hander. I ran into him once at the, what was the Pathmark out on Route 22 when he was campaigning. He couldn't run for a third term because they're term limited in New Jersey to 2 consecutive terms. But once you've had a term come in between, you can run again. And he ran again to become governor and was beaten in a primary. But he was campaigning in a supermarket, going from shopper to shopper, trying to get their vote. This is at Shearing Plow, which is became Merck and is now a giant apartment complex. Here's the mayor with another of his proteges, Matthew Rinaldo, who was our congressman for about 20 years. He had developed Matt's career. He was from Union and grew up here, and his parents lived in a house right next to the Caldwell Parsonage. Here he is speaking again, I'm not sure where, but there's Governor Minor returning that look as the mayor speaks. He doesn't look very happy about having to be there either. Okay, here he is, the mayor, smiling, big smile. And with James Mitchell, who was the Secretary of Labor in the administration of President Eisenhower, who ran for governor in 1961 against Richard Hughes. Mr. Mitchell lost and faded from the scene. This gentleman here is Howard Leary. And he was thought of in the 1960s as Biertuempfel's heir apparent. Who was going to replace him? This picture was taken in 1961, so the mayor at the time was about 67 years old. As it turned out, Mr. Leary had a bad heart and ended up having to retire to Florida later on in the 1960s. He was a delegate to the Republican National Convention several times. And was shrewd enough to go in uncommitted in most of the time. And if you take a postcard and send it to him with the name of the candidate you would like, he would consider them. Again, here he is in 1951 with the Township Committee. These by now were all basically his people. They were essentially men who would do whatever he said. I'm not talking about in any corrupt manner, but basically what he wanted, they went along with. And that's really when his reputation started to develop as the power in town. And again, there's Bill Freiberger. That is Mary Miller, who worked for the township for about 50 years and was served as clerk for about 20. Succeeded Mr. Freiberger. That's Jenny Miller, who was Mary's sister. They lived in a house that their family had moved to in 1730 on Colonial Avenue, where South Minster Parkway comes in. It's now two houses, actually it's three modern houses. The house was torn down. And these are, again, all the people who work for the town in various different public positions. Mary and her sister Jenny are remarkable because they're the only two women. We've seen several of these pictures of Reorganization Day, and that's the first time in 1951 that you actually see some women showing up. And that is Bob Ostertag, Coleman Kiss, Roy Kitchell, and Robert Lackey. And they would be with the mayor for another 10 years or so. This is one of the first modern buildings the township built in 1941, the municipal garage out at Swanstrom Place. It's still there. I think it's got a fresher coat of paint than it has now. But it's kind of ironic that the clean, fix and paint up your home is next to this building, which is obviously streaked with dirt and probably could use a little cleaning itself. But he had his office there. There was no real town hall. There's the Falls building in Union Center. The second floor was basically the municipal headquarters. So he eventually appropriated some space here as his office. And here it is, looking a little better. And still there, still in use as the headquarters. And there's the mayor's office and his departments that he was in charge of. And here he is at work. And this is again in 1948. There he comes. And he actually did open his mail and write his own responses to letters at this point. There was no clerical staff for the mayor. If he wanted something, he went to the clerk's office and had somebody do something for him. There was also no administrator at that time. And there he is. Yeah. Eventually, he stayed there for probably as an office and it stayed as an office until he died. But he really started working from home later on. But they eventually put an elevator in the building because he got to the point where he couldn't climb the stairs anymore. This is his elephant collection. Very famous. It's in the library somewhere. And these were sent to him originally by soldiers. As we showed you the picture of the American war dads. He wrote to just about every veteran from Union who was serving in World War II if he could find out their addresses. And he would write them letters. And they started to send him back from around the world as a gift for paying attention to them, these elephants. And he would display them, and people saw that he had this collection of elephants. And then folks from town, just over a number of years, when they were traveling, if they saw an elephant with the trunk up, symbol of victory, they would buy it and bring it back and give it to the mayor. He ended up with like 3,000 of them. Eventually he had to move them out of the office, and by the 1960s he had them put into the library, the old library. And they're there somewhere. This is municipal stationery. You know who it's from, obviously. And his picture is the interesting part of this. And this is from the 1960s. But you see the daisy button on his lapel, the daisy of the official flower, and the fact that if you called him, you could call him at home. There's his home phone number. And he was a member of literally dozens of service organizations, charities, civic and fraternal organizations. Plus, he had a long list of public positions that he held in town and in the county. This is the rest of them down there. I mean, it just goes on and on. And this is like 1955. That's it. Okay.
Portrait of Mayor F. Edward
This is something we did at the Historical Society. I don't know.
Well, let me tell you about Edward Biertuempfel in my day. Of course, I think Lou Giacomo said it best. He was a benevolent dictator. But those who were not of his political faith, we were not, they thought of as one Edgar Bergen and four Charlie McCarthys. He was really, ran the town for 43 years. Now, I don't know in today's world if any mayor could run any town for 43 years. But also remember that my sister Kay and us, we started the first Democratic Club in Union Township, and there was a man named Eddie Whalen, who was the Union County Democratic leader, and was amazed to find we weren't even of voting age at the time. We couldn't vote, but we did start the Democratic Party.
He had good points. One of the mistakes he made, which was hush-hush, it went over real big in that days. Ed Biertuempfel, they wanted to build Route 22 like they build all the other highways. Ed Biertuempfel, no, we're going to work 6 o'clock in the morning with that darn red Chevy. He'd be going all through the neighborhood, preparing his, what shall I say, the spiel for the day, you know what I mean? He knew when you brought something up, Ed Biertuempfel knew it. He could pin you right down. Of course, he rode through there that day, And one time I was at the town hall, we had the meeting there, township committee meeting, and somebody was complaining about some kind of traffic or this day this light that thing. And Ed Biertuempfel said, real calm, he said to him, how would you like to live behind a funeral home, Not a word, everybody shut up because that was worse than what the guy was complaining about,
Well, he was pretty well out of it by the time I realized who he was. First time actually I ever saw him was in between Connecticut Farms and Union High School. I attended St. Michael's, which was across the street from his home. And that was another police post in which they assigned a police officer to cross the kids. Again, it's on top of a hill, main road, people wouldn't stop for no crossing guard ordinance case. In those days, the kids, we used to use children, the older children, to get the younger children across the streets. And there was a motorcycle cop who usually handled that assignment. And when he was not present, particularly in the summer months, the mayor would come in blue shorts and a sleeveless T-shirt, I remember. And I didn't know he was at that, but he could walk into the middle of Waxhaw Road and traffic would stop for him, and he would start to direct traffic and cross the street. And it took a while for my money to realize who this person was and why they stopped for him, because most people who were driving would understand that he was not a person to trifle with. And,
you remember when they were building the parkway, he was ingenious in many ways, way ahead of his time, Give him credit for that. He wanted to build a tramway, what do you call it, the monorail, all the way down toward the shore in the center of the parkway. He did have to raise all the bridges or go under them, so that fell through like a tunnel ledge, But he was way ahead of his time. Why waste that center heap of dirt there? You could make use of it. Run the monorail, but he wouldn't do it because you'd have to raise the bridges.
In conclusion, Union was known as Biertuempfel's town, and he was known as Mr. Union. At the time of his death in April 1973, many public leaders, as Governor William T. Cahill, Congressman Matt Rinaldo, Anthony E. Russo, C. Louis Pisano, expressed their sorrow for his passing and admiration for his work and accomplishments in government for over 43 years.
By the way, the comment about Edgar Bergen and Fort Charlie McCarthy, some of you may not be old enough to remember, but it looks like most of you should be. Edgar Bergen was a ventriloquist, and his main dummy was a puppet called Charlie McCarthy. And that was Genevieve DiVenuto, who in fact was a major Democrat in town for many years. And that's what they referred to the township committee as Edgar Bergen, the mayor, and his 4 puppets, the 4 gentlemen I identified in the early picture. And that was pretty much, again, how the town was run. In a township committee form, the mayor has no more power legally other than what statutes give him, which is to make appointments to certain bodies like the planning board, than any other member of the committee. But he has just assumed authority, and the other 4 people let him have it. So he actually had, because the township committee is both a legislative and administrative and executive body on its own, because he had their total support, he basically was the legislative and executive leader of the town, which is where he derived his authority from, plus his personality. Anyway, let's see where we're going here. Innovations. This is a game that he was a pretty inventive person, and he was always into recreational items or activities, not so much for himself, but for others. This is a game he filed a patent for in 1919 when he was, I guess, about 25. And I don't still understand how it's played, and it never really made it, but he did have the imagination to create it. The town was becoming a commuter town, and this is the mayor, along with William Nothagel, Nelson Keeb, and that's, I can't really see, and that's Henry Cray, the township attorney. He was a township engineer. Probably, he wasn't a full-time employee, but he served the township from 1913 to, I believe, 1968 as the town engineer. And then his son-in-law took over as the engineer into the 1970s. And I think that's Ben Romano in there, who was from Montclair Avenue and Vauxhall. And this was a bus that went from Union into Newark. Before that, the buses basically went into Elizabeth. And this bus went along Salem Road through Hillside and into Newark in that direction. Here he is with Mr. Mayo, who was the dog catcher. And he was the dog catcher when I was growing up here, and he had a mouthful of golden teeth. And he hated cats. So the mayor made him this snare so that he didn't have to physically pick the animals up. He could get them in his snare. And the reason I mention cats is because and he did this in front of us. He had a truck that was like a good humor truck. It had various different doors where he would put the animals that he collected. And he would snare a cat, and he would basically bash its head out, the brains out, on the side of the truck. If you were a dog, and it's cruel now because our sensibilities have changed. But if you had an unidentified dog, or even if it didn't have a license and they couldn't find an owner, and nobody came for it, in 3 days it was killed. And the way they killed it was to put it in a chamber and suck the air out of the chamber and suffocate the animal. And that was done where the police range is now. So it was a relatively brutal animal control procedure at the time. Nowadays, we don't, our pets are kept until out on 22 in the back there until somebody comes for them, or they find some home for them. This is something that actually got national attention. It's a game board that he designed. There's the mayor, Summit Disheveled, and Esther Egbert, the first recreation director in Union. She complained to the mayor in the 1930s that her son Ken had nothing to do, and Ken's friends at Washington School had nothing to do. At the time, she was the head of the PTA at Washington School. So the mayor said, well, okay, I'll make you the recreation director, and you find something for them to do. They had already started with a system of town parks at the schools. Later on, that was expanded to the 24 town parks we have around town today. And he designed this board for the playgrounds. And the sandbox would have been made by the guys at Public Works, as would the seesaw back there and the swings and what have you. This is the picture in a national publication in 1943 with the kids on the game board. The one flaw, which is not shown here, is that I don't think it's reasonable to assume that kids would sit long enough to let the other kids play the games on the boards right around next to them. Particularly what looks like a knock hockey game going on in the middle. So I don't remember ever seeing them in a park. And I started going to the parks in Union about 1957, and they were probably obsolete by then. but here's a close-up of that picture. It's posed, and it just sewer pipes for playgrounds. Now these are basically, I believe, sanitary sewer pipes or storm sewer pipes. I can't tell which. And he didn't use these pipes for playgrounds, but he used these. And these I remember seeing. He had the sewer pipes, which you get from Public Works. You can, if you look closely, that's the Public Works building with the concrete slab sidings. And these are storm sewer pipes, not sanitary sewer pipes, so you didn't have to worry about that. And these are just, lumber. He probably painted these himself. He was a fairly accomplished cartoon artist. And
who actually built them? Al, didn't you build those?
Well, Al Koenig is here, who was with DPW during that time. And the guys at DPW built most of the early playground equipment. This is some of them. I remember this was at Hoover Playground, 60 years ago. Now, here's something that we do a lot of in town nowadays, and that is public celebrations. This is the 4th of July, which was started again after World War II. It was originally sponsored by the Republican Club and consisted of a carnival or a circus, free food, mostly warm milk and sugar donuts, and free pony rides and things like that. The Republican Club sponsored it until the late 1960s, and then the insurance became too expensive for them, and the township took it over. But it was the start of a bunch of celebrations, the Memorial Day Parade, and other things that we do here in town that have their antecedents in his decision to get the municipality involved in those types of activities, where before then it wasn't common that the town would be involved with public celebrations. And now they are almost all the time. And this is family night. This picture was taken at the playground that was in back of what was the Union High School at the time. This is July of 1961. And it's now Burnett Middle School. And he would show up at almost anything that was going on in town. Here he is as Santa Claus. This is the High School Park Civic Association. I know that because that's my Uncle Ed and my cousin Bob and my cousin Ken. And they lived over on in back of the high school. And this is probably the basement of the Lutheran Church on Boxwell Road. And he loved playing Santa Claus. We have pictures of him playing Santa Claus with sick kids. He, probably the first time I ever met him, not knowing who he was in the lobby of the Union Center National Bank, because I remember my mother took us one day over to see Santa Claus. And it was him. I didn't know it at the time, but it was one of his regular Christmas stops. This picture is more symbolic than informational. One of the things that he did was encouraging industrial development, but a type of industry that he had lived in Newark, where you might have some filthy, dirty factory, like a cork factory, that would be built right next to your house. And there was nothing you could do about it, and you just lived with it. You'd be happy that there might be work there, and if it kind of befouled the water or the air or what have you, it was just the way things were. So as Union started to develop, he had two ideas that were instrumental in how the town is now, or was, because a lot of the industrial commercial properties have now been converted to retail or to, a lot of them are churches now, as a matter of fact. But what he did was, before the 1950s, it was common for these industrial properties just to be slapped onto a piece of property. They'd pave over what they needed to pave over to put parking. There was no landscaping, no attempt to add any aesthetics to the buildings. And what he did was demand that, first of all, the industries be relatively clean. This is Vauxhall Road, if I'm not mistaken. And as you can notice, these are landscaped industries. If you go to a Hillside, or you go to Kenilworth, or you go to some other towns that are in eastern Union County that were developing about the same time, their industrial areas are slop shoots. And ours are still relatively pleasant. If you go down Lehigh Avenue, and Broadway Avenue particularly, and Commerce Avenue, you can see the effects. And the other thing was that these folks came in, they built their buildings, they paid taxes, but they used very little service from the town. And so that helped with the tax situation. And it led to a mix of residential and commercial that had a stabilizing effect on the tax rate without too much detriment to the town. Most of the, like Metals Disintegrating, which is now gone and it's a giant warehouse, or International Paint, those companies came into Union before the First World War, in which there was almost no regulation. So they were kind of exceptions to the development practices that later became common. And this is another innovation. This is commuter parking. This is in Freiberger Park, in front of what is basically in front of Town Hall, right out there. And and again, recognizing that this was a town of commuters into Newark, New York, wherever, this was designed to service the buses. There was a trolley that was built on Morris Avenue in 1906, 1907, and it ran until about 1928, when cars and buses more or less put it out of business. But this would allow people to not have to drive into these places. They could park in the center, and take the bus to wherever they wanted to go. And the idea that that the government was supposed to provide this for people was kind of new at the time and innovative. This is something that we do today. I wouldn't be surprised if the Township Committee is on their way to open something tonight. This is the A&P. I believe this is the one that was out on Morris Avenue, which is now where the money store used to be, and the branch of the Children's Hospital is out there now. This is, I'm not sure what he's opening here, but there he is with the scissors and a ribbon. First State Bank. Again, you see that look. Among other things that positions the mayor held, he was a director of the Union Center National Bank. So he probably wasn't all that happy that the competition was opening up. Here he is at the groundbreaking of St. Michael's in 1955. And that is Father Driscoll. That's, I believe, Ostertag, Coleman Kiss, Monsignor Begley, the mayor. I don't know who that is, and I don't know who that is, and that's a guy by the name of Edward Ide, Father Edward Ide. I went to school at St. Michael's. That's why, the only reason I can recognize most of these people. Okay. Here he is going from the ridiculous to the sublime, or the sublime to the ridiculous. Here he is opening up the Adventure Car Hop on Route 22. The girls don't have their skates on now, but that was one of the things they sometimes did. It was a new feature in dining, in which you drove your car up, and somebody came out and greeted you and took your order, and then came back with your order. And he's smiling through all these pictures. I'm not sure whether it's at the girls or the food, but probably both. And it became a hangout for kids for the most part. Drag racing was very common on Route 22 in the evenings. To say that I participated in I had a friend who had a very fast Dodge Charger, and he would, into the 1960s. Eventually it died out. But here he is with the manager and one of the girls, and looking at the fair. The 1950s Chevy here is famous because he always had a relatively new red and black Chevrolet. And I don't know where he got him from, but he seemed to have a new one. He never worked at a job after the early 1940s. He became mayor and basically worked full-time at it until his death. And his income was basically part-time from the township committee. He was a freeholder for a while and on the board of taxation. But the claim was that after he and his brother sold the court business, that he had secured enough sufficient funds from that to more or less live. And that was the story, and that's what they stuck to for a long time. Here he is opening the town and campus about 1960. And that's out by Kane University. It's now the bookstore in that giant building that has the circular building here. One of the interesting facts about this is 65 years ago or so, and the traffic on Morris Avenue is still backed up as it is today. We have a photograph in the Historical Society collections of Route 22, and because it was a Board of Adjustment photo, which was dated November 15th, 1960, and the traffic is backed up as far as the eye can see. So our traffic situation is not new. Here he is opening the Rickel Home Store, which was out at the Union Plaza. I don't know, there's several stores in there now. This was 1968, and here he is, at the opening of some some hole-in-the-wall luncheonette in town. I don't know where it is. There's no identifying caption to the picture, but he's got his favorite hat and with his favorite object, food. And here he is at some fishmonger's opening, and he's inspecting the lobster. He would go anywhere for any opening in town. Here he is with a kitchen sink at Jan's, the old Jan's that was on Morris Avenue before it burned. And they moved it over to where the A&P was at the corner of what is now an apartment house. Again, a big smile on his face, and you know why. This is one of the first of the slogans that he came up with in the course of his career. And here he is with this is later on. It originally more or less was in a response to what was like a juvenile delinquency crisis in the 1950s. And this was an idea that to promote recreational activities and other activities for the kids in town so that they would have something to do. And he had created this slogan. He had Union has loads of good kids, which came in the 1960s. Also, Union is a town of gracious living. And the last one I think he did was Union, the happy town. And but this is his most famous one. What helps youth helps Union. This was in signs coming in and out of town for quite a while. And here is the Union has loads of good kids. You can see by the quality of the haircut that this is, and the vehicles, that this is late 60s, early 1970s, when delinquency was replaced by a lot of drug use amongst the youth. Here he is at Huckles, which was in the basement of the Union Rec Center, which was the old Connecticut Farm School, which at one time was the new Connecticut Farm School, and existed until it's the Western Hill condominium development now, next to Connecticut Farm School. And this is Huckles Hangout, and they were donated a television when it opened. This is 1948. Originally, he established Huckles as a place for returning veterans, but they aged out of it pretty quickly. It became a place for kids, for teenagers for the most part. And there's a group of them here. We were talking about him painting the turtles, the sewer turtles, and this is paintings that he did. You can see him doing it. He painted the walls at Huckles Hangout, and with these pictures of 1940s teenagers doing some kind of dance. There's some more of it. He drew cartoons most of his life. When he died, he left a collection of them. I think we have some of the Historical Society yet. And here he is with the Girl Scouts. Having the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts participate in various different functions, coming up with opening up township meetings, award ceremonies, what have you. He was very involved in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. That role is still, well, it's performed now by the junior ROTC at the high school. I think there's one Boy Scout troop left in town at Connecticut Farms Church, and there's a Girl Scout troop. I'm not sure where they're affiliated, who they're affiliated with. Pardon? The church. And so the high school ROTC provides most of the ceremonial function for the meetings and what have you. And that's another thing that we still do to this day. Here he is on Memorial Day flag raising at the park. That's Vauxhall Road, going uphill towards St. Michael's and his house. And this is in the little park. It's in front of the church there. And here he is in Freiberger Park with a group of kids who I believed, this is a person who I knew, and he lived right next to the park, which is maybe why he's in the picture. I don't know who these gentlemen are. They look familiar, but I don't know them. But this was Freiberger Park, before they built the library and municipal building, was used more as a park and a meeting place for ceremonies and celebrations. It became less and less of that for a while as they built the buildings there. And then later on it became, if you remember, they used to have art shows there and craft shows and what have you later on. Here's with the Girl Scouts again, getting ready to kiss a baby. Here he is with the sinister Al Arnold. Harold Arnold was, again, his friend. Notice the eyebrow. And handing out equipment to a group of boys who are, I guess, would-be baseball players. Recreation was one of his primary interests. Our park and playground system is basically something that he built, mostly on town-owned property. The Union inherited, or not inherited, but acquired. You know, we'll get to that later. acquired a great deal of property during the Depression, large amounts of property. And just about every playground in Union that's not in a school is on that property. And Rapkin Field, which is partially owned by the Board of Education and partially owned by the township, was one of those. Biertuempfel Park, I believe, was purchased from the Kubashes, but they may have picked that up in taxes either, I'm not sure. So it was an extensive park system. It was actually, they had park counselors, camp counselors in all these playgrounds for years, and until the early 2000s. And they had contests. Each park would have a softball team or a chess team or something, and they would have competitions amongst the parks. Okay. Here he is again at Jan's with two kids, excuse me. And I assume he was celebrating something. Could have been his baseball team. We'll get to that in a bit. Here is, again, a celebration. I think this is probably sometime in the 1950s, early 50s. Pretty good crowd. This was at the parking lot out in front here. Here he is again as Santa in a hospital. And that's a child. It was very common in those. That's polio. That's a child who has polio. And his charities, he was very big with the charity of Sister Kenny, who had a therapeutic program. She was a nun from Australia who developed a therapeutic program for children with polio. And after the vaccine was developed in the 1950s, polio pretty much became a thing of the past. And so did Sister Kenny and her therapies. Here he is. I believe he's opening day at Teenerly down at 5 Points. That would be Roselle Park there. He was at Little League opening day. Every opening day you wanted, he'd show up at. Here he is singing Christmas carols with the folks in front of Town Hall. And there he is. And there's his baseball team. And the F. Edward Biertuempfel Indians. This is probably in the 1960s. And he was sponsored by him until his death. And here he is pumping gas for Sister Kenny. Someone asked why he was able to pump his own gas. And I said, who was going to tell him not to? And this is Brushes with Fame. Here he is at CBS in New York giving a talk on the township and kind of putting it on the map to a certain extent. Here he is with a person I can't remember. Do you know who this is, Tom?
Miss Reingold.
Miss Reingold. The beer, we used to be the beer capital of America at one time in competition with St. Louis and Milwaukee. Not Union, but the Newark area. Here he is with Joe Collins, who played first base and outfield for the Yankees for about 9 years. Appeared in 7 World Series, and he was in the winner in 5 of them. Lived on a suburban road here in town. And this is, I think, it's in the Elks Club. You can see the Elks organization papers in the background. And he eventually worked, when he retired from baseball, because the Yankees were going to trade him to Kansas City. And he wasn't going to go to Kansas City. So he retired from the Yankees in 1960, or after the 1959 season, I believe, and went to work for Ballantine Beer for a while. And then he eventually was a business developer for the Union Center National Bank before he passed away in the 80s. There's a park named for him on Liberty Avenue. and it was named for him while he was still alive. That's a tradition in Union that most other towns don't have. And almost all our parks are named after people who were alive when the parks were named for them. They're almost all dead except Jerry Petty and Anthony Russo. But that was a tradition that developed in 1941 when they named Freiberger Park after the longtime town clerk, William Freiberger. Here he is with Miss Brooks. For those of you who can remember our Miss Brooks, that's Eve Arden. And another personage, and I think he's got one of those looks on his face. You know, but it's kind of tough to tell. Here he is with Jackie Robinson. And that's probably when this picture was taken. He got it after he retired in 1956 when the Dodgers were moving to Los Angeles and he wasn't going to go with them. He took a job with a Chock full of Nuts coffee company and became a public relations person for them. This is when they had opened up a Chock full of Nuts like coffees and dessert place, breakfast diner or whatever you might want to call it, out on Route 22 in the Center Island. It was a building that looked like a cottage that elves would live in. And it's now a tire store, box tire store. But here was Jackie at their grand opening with some of the Chock full of Nuts donuts that went with their coffee. Here he is, there's Joe Collins. We saw him before, but this is Gil McDougall, who was another Yankee who lived in New Jersey somewhere, I forget where. And at the Elks again, giving a speech and at some fundraiser. This, believe it or not, is the president of Chile. And why he's with the president of Chile and his wife, I don't know. But there he is. Here he is with the wife of the 32nd president of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt. She's getting the key. I think she was speaking at Kane University or Newark State College, whatever it was called in those days. And I think he went to give her the key to the township. Here he is with U Thant. And U Thant was the Secretary General of the United Nations. Here he is with the 34th President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower. And here he is with his wife, Christine, his daughter, Beverly, and his son, F. Edward Jr. He's the only person at this table smiling. That says something. There are stories about him, policemen running into him middle of the night, 2 a.m. at night, in the morning, riding around town looking to see if everything was all right, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 in the morning. As you can tell by this presentation, he was everywhere attending all kinds of things. And that may have played a toll on his family life that maybe or maybe not represented in the faces on these people. And he did it for the town.
Is it the money? Because, you know, I'll buy you the pills.
Oh, no. I told you, if you take drugs, you reduce your body's ability to fight the allergy on its own.
Drugs. Drugs? It's an antihistamine. Doctors take them. What? It's not a natural thing, is it?
No, it's not.
I mean, if you want to go see this car naturally, I guess
There's
you can walk.
Biertuempfel in the movies. That's the actor, Ned Beatty, and there's the mayor. There's a story to the bust in front of you regarding, and that bust there, which we'll get to at the end. And the end of an era. He died in April of 1973 at the age of 79. He had been sick for 2 or 3 years before that. It started actually one late winter when he was driving to a meeting somewhere in the municipal building, and he was driving up the road out there from Morris Avenue up to the parking lot. And his car started, it was icy, and the car started to slip on the ice. So he stopped the car and did what most people did in those days. He kept a bag of sand in the trunk of his car, and he went out and threw some sand down on the ice to get traction. And he slipped and damaged his hip, and that started a downward trend in his health that he was pretty much out of it. I was in the Army from 1969 to 1972, so I didn't really see any of this except when I got back, and somewhere between when I got out in September and his death in April. The last time I saw him, he was in a relatively new red and black Chevrolet. His wife was driving, and he was laying, looking unconscious in the back seat of the car as she was driving him around the canyon in the center. But he did not resign. He stayed in. He won his last election in 1971 by his usual 60%. And the union leader published an endorsement editorial for that election. And it was basically, they stated that he should have retired years ago when his doctors told him to, but he didn't. And so he's on the ballot, and we suggest you vote for him. His popularity was such that he would constantly, as I said, he was getting ready to retire, possibly in the early 1960s. He was by that time approaching 70, had been in office for 30 some odd years. And he had a home down the shore and a fishing boat, and he liked to fish. Didn't have any hobbies, but that was one. And what happened was in 1960, the Democrats actually came close to winning an election with Jim Conlon and Anthony Russo. And in 1961, they actually won. First Democrats on the Township Committee since the 1920s. And what that meant was that if he didn't run and another Democrat won, or if he did run and another Democrat beat another Republican, not him, then the Democrats would take over control of the Township Committee. And that induced him to stay. And he did stay, and stayed in office until his death. It's interesting that when he died, this is the paper that announces his death. It contained this subheadline. And there were tributes coming in from everywhere, including one from Anthony Russo, who was very, very laudatory about his time serving with Mayor Biertuempfel, which is one of the reasons why I was getting these phone calls from him telling me don't let him forget Biertuempfel's name, because he admired the man. And I think he changed his mode of operation as soon as he had opposition on the Township Committee, that he now had to be a little bit more compromising. He always had the town's interests at heart. And I think Mayor Russo and Jim Conlon, who was also on the Township Committee, understood that. This is his funeral. Didn't have to travel far. The funeral home is next to his house. This is the front of Haverly and Barth on Pine Avenue at Vauxhall Road. So this is his home. He was buried out at Hollywood Cemetery. It wasn't buried, he was put in a crypt there in one of the new mausoleums. And his wife and son his wife lived until 1988 and she passed away. His son lived in the house, actually in this part, which is kind of a separate part of the house. And eventually he moved down to Normandy Beach, Lavalette, where the mayor had his summer home. And that's where he lived. So this house was empty for a number of years and deteriorated quite significantly. And there's the back. But in his house, he had, this is where his office was. He had a large sunroom there where he could entertain. This is his workshop, and he had a storage building in front of it. He was always building something, fixing something. This is his family room. These are all kind of things that people didn't have in their houses very much, but he did. And that, I think, is the Watchung Mountain, which is why this is Overlook Terrace. When he moved there, you had a clear view all the way out. This is, again, his workshop, and that's his storeroom, which I managed to, I was going by one day and saw someone working there, and they were emptying the house out. This was in the early 2000s. And so I stopped, and it turned out it was his granddaughter. And she was there supervising, helping her uncle, F. Edward Jr., to empty the house out in preparation for a sale. So I got to walk through the whole place, and this is why I know what these buildings are. And in his little storeroom there was basically all kinds of cases of Ballantine beer and diabetic supplies and what have you. People just gave him lots of things, which he didn't need much. The house was loaded, 3 30-yard dumpsters, took the stuff they wanted to get rid of. They then had a house sale, and I stopped by to visit that, and the house was still crowded with things and stuff. He had a Rathskeller in his basement where he entertained. He built this outdoor grill himself, had a rotisserie that he rigged up for it, and he also had a large, you might call it a gazebo nowadays, but so he could entertain outside in his yard. This is the parking lot at Haverly and Bars. And he liked to entertain, and but his home ended up in the hands of a real estate developer, and this is what's there now. 2 very large homes. This one's on the market for about $1 million, and so there's really no remnant of him other than around town. His bust out there, I think there's a plaque for him in town hall. There's no relatives or family that we're aware of anywhere around here. The 3 Democrats that I mentioned in the headlines of his death basically won the next election, and his influence ended pretty quickly, at least on the township committee. But the things that he did and established in his own time, the recreation, the industrial development, which has now basically been converted to retail and warehouses and things like that. But the idea that those things would have some design to them was his idea, separating the industry from the residential, which they're commonplace now, but when he was in office, they weren't. And the recreation program, which for years was one of the better ones in New Jersey. Other towns have caught up over the years. And but in the election of 1973, the 3 Democrats won, and then in 1974, Anthony Russo became mayor. And one of the things about Mayor Biertuempfel is he didn't like separate bodies. He didn't want industrial commissions. He didn't like environmental commissions. Never wanted a planning board. He would take care of it himself one way or the other, which he pretty much did. But after he passed away, we ended up with a lot of formalized agencies in town, which was just kind of modernizing. So that's basically a little bit of his story. It could be much longer and deeper than this, but we don't have a whole lot of time. I think we need to be out of here in about 10 minutes. But I'll take questions for the allotted time if anybody has any.
What happened to the committee people who opposed him when he was mayor?
There weren't any. Oh, the ones in the 1930s, they didn't necessarily oppose him, but they had other choices for, and they didn't necessarily follow him all the way through. But they eventually just, I think Nelson Keebe, they left town. A lot of them were in business, and their business took them elsewhere, and they retired or quit. He very quickly started to establish himself in the 1930s as the standard for the Republicans in town. And so that by 1939, when Mayor Schramm left for Pittsburgh, it was no question as to who was going to be mayor. And even the people who may have preferred Schramm went along with Mayor Biertuempfel because he was now the authority. And he was also the smartest guy on the township committee as far as the governmental operations were concerned. He understood finance. He managed to bail the town out of a lot of debt by a lot of frugality. And there was an administration building in Union Center that's still standing. It's the last one that's still standing between Morris Avenue and the construction sites for the apartments. And the town had built that in the 1920s, and he sold it. They sold it off and they took the money and used it to pay off some of the debts. So he was, besides being a political influencer and power in town, he also was probably the smartest guy there in terms of operating a municipality, which he had, worked in a business, a relatively small business, a relatively or medium-sized business in his family. So he brought that with him, and so it was almost natural that he would.
Another question. What did he think about the minorities during those times?
Well, in those days, most of the minorities, which were basically in two places in Union, Vauxhall and Curryville or Brookside, were Republicans. And he basically was very favorable to them in a sense that they were not left behind. When he died, a person, I think it may have been Howard Leary, who they contacted in Florida, where he had moved to, and asked about him, and he said his strengths were he wanted a clean, orderly, and well-managed town, and that everybody in town counted. And to a certain extent, to the extent that a person born in the 1890s would add minorities into that fold, he did. We have pictures of him at picnics in Vauxhall, at the Vauxhall, the nursery that was up there. They had a library built up there. They had a daycare, which is the nursery, and they had a free health clinic, the baby station, which was in the firehouse there. And these were all things that most towns didn't do, and certainly most suburban towns didn't. And so he was, again, accommodating to everybody. It's something that we live here now, and we know that the town is very accommodating to just about everybody. Anybody who comes here, and people are here now from every nook and cranny of the earth. And they come here, they're accepted, and they seem to be pretty happy.
How did he deal with Stockton Village?
He did not like apartments. Eventually, he got the township to zone apartments kind of out of existence. They really couldn't do that. But until the 1960s and 1970s, zoning power for municipalities was pretty much in their own hands. Laws changed, the courts changed things so that you didn't have the leeway to zone and manage the land use in your town. But he, he just didn't like apartments. And but I don't really know how he felt about Stuyvesant Village other than, Stuyvesant Village was built more or less in the late 30s and into the 1940s. Because of the World War II housing shortage, there was no way he was going to stop that, okay? Or Normandy Village, or Union Village, or all the other garden apartments that were built during that time period. He did make sure, though, that all the World War II temporary housing that was built for workers and was first used for returning veterans when they got home. And then once they moved out and got their own homes, he had it torn down. And so none of that stuff existed. He didn't want it to be there and fester as substandard housing. Okay, on the end there.
I just want to share a quick story. About 1968 or so, my father was in township committee meeting, and in Biertuempfel, he mentioned he didn't like gladiator. And in fact, he was plain spoken and powerful enough, veteran enough, not really worried too much what people thought at times. And a man
Sally, take care.
who had bought a house next to St. Luke's Church on Washington and Winchester Street. He said, Mayor, my family wakes up in the mornings, 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, the church bells ring. 11 o'clock, the church bells ring. What can you do about it? And Mayor Biertuempfel said, Mr. Sternberg, if you don't like the sound of church bells on a Sunday morning, I suggest you move out of here.
Okay, well, by that time, he had nothing to lose. He was Barbara, you're going to be the last question because we've got to get it going.
In one of the pictures in the beginning of the presentation, it showed a crowd in 1929 supporting him. Do you have any idea how he was able to get that many people together?
Well, I think part of it was his idea that he wanted to keep Union kind of like it was. In the 1920s, there was this push to develop and develop and develop and develop. And we went from 4,000 people to 16,000 people in those years. And we had 24,000 people in 1940. We had 38,000 people in 1950 and 50,000 people in 1960. The town was pretty well filled up by 65 years ago. But he put a break on that, and it was kind of like the NIMBY thing, the not in my backyard that you might have read about in Somerset County 40 years ago and 30 years ago in Hunterdon County, where the people moved out there for their rural qualities and then found out that their farmland view was now being occupied by houses. And there was some of that there. But you really couldn't stop development in those days. You can't stop it today. You can regulate it a little more. But he was really, and he had a personality that people just followed. And he had a way of treating people that, how can you say no to that smile? How are you going to argue with that smile? So that was probably part of his attraction, and he worked very hard at politics and at governing the town. All right, folks, that's it.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. And